Good evening, guys. Welcome back to another video. You join me tonight on the anniversary of the Rettendon Range Rover murders. I had a special video planned, but I was unable to finish it in time, so that's something I'm going to do in the future as probably part of a two-part series. I'll be aiming to post a lot more content in the upcoming future. I've also purchased a new microphone, so let me know if you hear if it sounds any better or any worse. The feedback's always appreciated. But yeah, like I say, I will be aiming to post, a lot more content in the upcoming future, so stay tuned. Today, I'll be bringing you part 3 in the undisclosed evidence material, as naming Bernard O'Mahony as a potential murder suspect. Now, some of you may know from listening to previous videos that the content was previously taken down, but it's now back up, so I can now give you the final part of that content, which I'll remind viewers was an anonymous letter sent to John Womes naming Bernard O'Mahony as a potential murder suspect. So, let's get down to business. When you consider O'Mahony's violent history, all his consuming desire to settle scores with anybody who crosses his path, and his self-confessed state of mind at that time, he cannot and should not have been disregarded as a serious suspect. We know through police computer print cutouts that he was a suspect, yet the police never once interviewed him on record. The same amount of damaging evidence glares at him in the Leah Betts case, and again we know he was a suspect. In the second part of this document, we will highlight events after the murders which catapulted O'Mahony from suspect to star witness. The Rettendon inquiry. The police considered O'Mahony a suspect from the moment the Rettendon murders was discovered. On page 179 of his book, he described his partner Deborah being met at school with their children by detectives and being taken away. He also describes being met off the train from London. Ironically, without prompting from the police, he offers up the sports bag he is carrying to be searched. I had a bag with me. I opened it and said, "Do you want to search it?" He said, "No." How would O'Mahony know at such an early stage the significance of a sports bag or holdall? He claims he spent the day walking around London in a daze. From what we know of O'Mahony, this is nonsense. Where in London was he, and was he alone? These questions and others, such as did you travel to London the night before, i.e. the night of the murders, because he was certainly there early the next day, have been put to him and should have been. Have never been put to him and should have been. The very next day after the trio's bodies were discovered, Detective Inspector Brian Story charged 2 of Leah's friends with supplying the drug to her. Tucker was dead. O'Mahony, the suspect they had never questioned, had spoken to the press. The police knew he would be under threat from Tucker's associates. As we know, he had already been threatened by Tucker, and so it seems they decided to groom him for their forthcoming high-profile trial in the hope that he would help them, rather than put the evidence they had against him to him. On December the 12th, 1995, O'Mahony's rivals, see page 185, took over the door at Raquel's, and for a man who professed to walking out of that way of life, O'Mahony acted oddly. He went to the club and threatened the door staff with a knife, effectively putting them out. Their company withdrew 2 days later. O'Mahony's old door staff were reinstated. This goes totally against the grain of a man who claims he gave Raquel's up to escape a way of life laced with criminal activity. Further evidence of his desire to hang on to his lucrative business takes place on January the 17th, 1996, page 186, when he appears before Basildon Council to appeal against their decision to revoke his door licence. On January the 19th, 1996, O'Mahony loses his appeal. He claims he didn't care, but he rang Dave Britt, an environmental health officer at Basildon Council, and was very abusive, threatening to take the matter further. O'Mahony had no visible income and an expensive house to pay for. Tucker, his first hurdle, had now been taken out of the situation. Still, O'Mahony could do nothing. Despite his efforts to sway the council, he realised he was losing his grip on the lucrative Raquel's club. Fate finally took a hand and the club closed through lack of popularity following the bad publicity over Lear and the Rettendon murders. During December and January, the police continued to warn O'Mahony his life was in danger. See page 76. Was this a ruse to put pressure on O'Mahony? We know that Essex police are capable of setting up the most elaborate tricks to scare potential witnesses into divulging information. Maybe the police thought if they squeezed O'Mahony enough, he would go to them for help. They would then ask him to scratch their back. On January the 9th, 1998, O'Mahony attacked a man called Robert Chilton, who works for a company called Eclipse. They have a house maintenance contract with Basildon Council. O'Mahony claims Chilton, an ex-friend of Tate's, was saying a group of London doormen had put a 10 grand contract out on him. O'Mahony, as per usual, except of course in the case of the Rettendon trio, he claims, goes on the offensive, his new way of life looking transparently thin by the second. On January the 16th, 96, DCI Shed seizes the Packman and Betts tape from Gary Jones at the News of the World, now with the Daily Mirror. January the 22nd, 1996, an unidentified man turns up at Stephen Packman's home in Pound Lane, Leyden, Basildon, Essex, and advises Packman to keep O'Mahony out of any proceedings. At his trial, Packman claimed the man threatened to burn down his house and break his legs. It does sound like the kind of dialogue O'Mahony uses when advising people. Stephen Smith, Packman's co-accused, told Norwich Crown Court, Daily Star, Wednesday, December the 11th, 96, page 9, he was scared of the bouncer, Bernie, who he heard was a friend of the notorious Cray twins. Smith said he was as frightened of him as he was of Mike Tyson. He added, he was known for being nasty. O'Mahony was never questioned about any of these allegations of attempting to pervert the course of justice. The police, it seems, were busy bending over backwards to accommodate him. January the 25th, 96, O'Mahony meets Brian Story at Malden Police Station. We do not know what is discussed, but again no statement or records are made. January the 30th, 96, O'Mahony finally makes his statement, a first for him in 36 years of crime. Why? What is absolutely incredible is the fact O'Mahony never names or implicates the drug dealers in Raquel's. He actually confesses to having lied to a reporter earlier by saying he had never even heard of Mark Murray, the dealer who he admits in his book he and Tucker had an arrangement with. O'Mahony also confesses to receiving £500 a week from Murray as a drink. O'Mahony must have refused to give evidence against his associates, as he would have had to implicate himself and Tucker. Instead, he fingers Packman, but he is acquitted. O'Mahony goes on to give a sanitised version of his activities and involvement with drugs in his book. The officer who took O'Mahony's statement, D.I. Story, hadn't taken such an active role with any other witnesses. Why did he not ask O'Mahony about Murray on record? Why was he so keen to allow O'Mahony to escape prosecution? Did the attitude he adopted with O'Mahony continue when he took the reins of the Rettendon inquiry? It's painfully clear O'Mahony's evidence had only one purpose, to convict Packman, the most vulnerable person of all those involved. The Betts inquiry was a weight on Story's shoulders. Everyone was watching. He needed a result at any price. That's why he led O'Mahony through such a turbulent time. That is why he dared not even suggest to O'Mahony he was responsible or played a part in either crime. In The Guardian, Friday, December the 13th, 96, Detective Sergeant Nicholl said that in the early stages of the Lear inquiry, there was information which led police to suspect that O'Mahony might also have been involved in drug dealing at Raquel's, but he said further inquiries failed to reveal any evidence of that and no charges were ever brought. In the East Anglian Daily Times, Thursday, December the 12th, 96, Mr O'Mahony said that he was well aware of the drug dealing that went on in the club, but he said he had no involvement in drug dealing and he had never been questioned in relation to Lear's death. Proof, if ever any was needed, O'Mahony was suspected. O'Mahony did at least know all about the drugs in Raquel's, and O'Mahony was never questioned once by any of the 35 officers who spent 12 months seeking the truth. Detective Sergeant Nicholl should explain what further inquiries cleared O'Mahony if O'Mahony was never even questioned. On February the 12th, 96, Sue Woods, one of the ex-promoters at Raquel's and girlfriend of O'Mahony's best friend Gavin, was questioned about O'Mahony and the Rettendon murders at her office, FAB Productions. Woods was also a very good friend of Tucker and his wife Anna Whitehead. On February the 13th, 96, O'Mahony claims he went to Workhouse Lane to see where his friends died and that he found a live shotgun cartridge. First of all, we only have O'Mahony's word he found the cartridge on this day. Secondly, we don't even know if he did find the cartridge. Thirdly, we know O'Mahony had visited the crime scene half a dozen times prior to this, but after the crime was committed. February the 15th, 96, Michael Bowman, the man who had gone to Raquel's with Tucker after O'Mahony was arrested for possessing a machine gun which was obtained from Tucker and Tate, who wanted it to kill somebody, Ian Hepburn, a Sun journalist, wrote in the paper that day, "Police believe the killer of the trio travelled with them, then got out and picked up the weapon hidden nearby while pretending to open a gate." What O'Mahony did when he read this is extraordinary. He telephoned Ian Hepburn and told him he needed an independent witness to see over a matter he was going to report to the police. O'Mahony told Hepburn he had been to see where his friends had died, and while standing at the gate, he had disturbed the grass and undergrowth and found a live shotgun cartridge, the same size, make as was used in the killings. He said he picked it up without thinking, panicked when he realised his fingerprints would be on it, so had thrown it into an adjacent field by a large oak tree. But he wasn't sure exactly where. He told Hepburn if it was found now, he might be implicated. Would Hepburn contact the police, report what he had been told, and then meet O'Mahony with the police? Hepburn agreed. O'Mahony later told the police he thought the cartridge may have been orange. He has told others since then it was blue. He told the police it hadn't been fired. It was new, although it had just started to form a thin film of light rust, suggesting it must have been there for about a month or so. The police should have asked O'Mahony what he was doing or what he was looking for. On the 5 or 6 occasions he visited the remote farm track after the murders. He only admitted doing so after he was warned locals had taken the registration numbers of vehicles visiting the track. If he found the cartridge, why couldn't he show the police exactly where he had thrown it? O'Mahony is an intelligent man. He knew he would need an independent witness to share his version of events, which is why he wrote Hepburn in. O'Mahony is an intelligent man. Sorry guys, I just found that hard to read. Right. We only have O'Mahony's word he found the cartridge on the 13th of February 96. Is it possible it was lost on the day of the murder? Were O'Mahony's visits to the scene made in the hope he could recover the lost live cartridge? Did Bowman's arrest and Hepburn's report panic O'Mahony into taking action? He knew there was a link between him and Bowman. He read the police believed they knew firearms, and one can surmise cartridges had been hidden at the scene in wait for the victims. O'Mahony says he found the cartridge at the foot of the gate where he read police believed the weapons were hidden. If O'Mahony had lost the cartridge with his fingerprints on and he felt the police had made a step in his direction, this action alone would have covered him if the cartridge was recovered. February the 16th, 96, O'Mahony meets DC Hepburn, Bob Chappell and DC Dean Sanford at the murder scene. O'Mahony claims it was dark when they arrived. He told the police what he had told Hepburn and they said they would look for it tomorrow. March the 1st, 96. O'Mahony is questioned by Sanford and Chappell at Southwood and Ferrers Police Station from 9:10 a.m. until 11:15 a.m. That night, he goes to Club Art in Southend. This club was run by Tucker. O'Mahony tells Taz, the head doorman, and Tucker's friend, the police think he may be responsible. He wants Taz and Tucker's associates to know he didn't do it. 3 months after the event, this may seem a little belated, had police interested the press reports and the cartridge revelation made O'Mahony panic into thinking that the net was closing in on him? March the 7th, 96, a man named Danny Marlowe, whom O'Mahony admits to having threatened over a debt, is murdered in Leicester. O'Mahony had been to his home some months earlier and to his place of work looking for him. Somebody has been charged with this murder. May the 1st, 96. O'Mahony is once more questioned at Southwood and Ferrers police station. O'Mahony admits he asked the detectives, Chappell and Sanford, if they had found the cartridge, and they tell him that they had not got around to looking for it properly. We had a quick look, they add, and that's as far as O'Mahony was concerned. The subject was closed. On this association, 2 detectives from Leicester were also at the police station, and they questioned him about the murder of Danny Marlowe. O'Mahony was at Southwood and Ferrers police station from midday until 3 p.m. The Leicestershire officers then went to O'Mahony's home to see some paperwork relating to Danny Marlowe's death. May the 12th, 96. Wilmes and Steele arrested. May the 15th, 96. John Marshall, Tate's ex-partner, goes missing. O'Mahony too knew Marshall. He occasionally recovered debts, in the only way he knew how, for Marshall. See Go, Cash on Demand article, R.E. O'Mahony. What is odd about the Marshall murder is the fact Detective Superintendent Gamble of Basildon Police was given the task of investigating it, yet the police are adamant there is no link between it and the Rettendon killings. It is accepted Marshall was murdered in Kent, and he was found in his abandoned Range Rover in Sydenham, South East London. Why would Basildon Police be asked to investigate a crime committed in Kent if there was no link? The police, despite not solving the case, are adamant that Marshall was not involved in drugs. We have learned that this is either as a result of poor police work or a deliberate attempt to cover up the truth. Marshall was heavily involved in drugs, and he traded on occasion with his close lifelong friend and business partner, Pat Tate. Gary Russo, another man who went into business with Marshall selling cars, quit the partnership when he learned of Marshall's drug dealing activities. We have learned from affidavits filed in the case involving Mr. Russo. Both O'Mahony and Russo were questioned by detectives about the Marshall murder. It goes without saying, both interviews were informal. Gary Russo can be contacted at Essex Ford, car sales, Cherrydown, Basildon, Essex, where he works as a car salesperson. Basildon Evening Echo, Friday, May the 24th, 96. Page 8, Detective Superintendent Mike Gamble appears in the paper appealing for information about a grey-head sports bag missing from Mr. Marshall's car. The sports bag was never found. The motive for taking it was never established. Marshall's murder certainly wasn't a robbery gone wrong. Marshall left £5,000 in cash on the dashboard, which his killers chose to ignore. Nearly £2,000 in cash was left on the victims at Rettendon. What did Marshall have in that bag that was more valuable than £5,000 in ready cash? Could it have been the proceeds of a deal involving the Rettendon trio? The evidence was there in the back of the Range Rover at Rettendon. Police found an empty, identical head sports bag discarded in the boot. Whatever it had contained was gone. We doubt if the police tested it for traces of drugs. They knew what they may have found, and the link between the Rettendon and Marshall would have been forged. They would have had to let Steele and Wilmes go. Mark Hall, a doorman who worked for O'Mahony and Tucker at Raquel's, used to work for Parcel Force delivering packages and parcels. Hall couldn't resist taking items for himself or to sell to his fellow doormen. One such haul was a consignment of sports bags, which was sold on and distributed through the door staff at Raquel's. Tucker, O'Mahony, Marshall and Rolfe all had at least one. On January the 9th, 96, in a joint operation between Essex Police and the Internal Parcel Force Security Department, Hall was arrested at his home, and they found stolen parcels and cocaine and cannabis, which Hall claimed was for his personal use. He was successfully prosecuted by Parcel Force, but surprisingly not by Essex Police. We do not know when exactly, but we are told Hall arranged to meet O'Mahony in the weeks after his arrest at a car park in Pitsea, Essex. We do not know what the two discussed. A feature linking O'Mahony and Marshall's murder, never pursued by the police as far as we know, is the fact Marshall's Range Rover, with his body still inside, was dumped in Roundhill, Upper Sydenham, South East London. This is less than 1 mile from O'Mahony's London flat in Cowden Street, London, SE6, number not known. This link emphasises the concern about O'Mahony's movements on the night of the Rettendon murders and the day the bodies were found. O'Mahony admits to being in London early in the morning on the day the Rettendon trio were found. He admits he spent the whole day walking around London aimlessly, which seems unlikely at best. We don't know where he spent the night of the murders, nor do we know if he had spent any time with Marshall in the area his body was found, and the area O'Mahony supposedly spends a lot of time wandering aimlessly. We also know O'Mahony had a sports bag with him when the police met him off the train on the day of the Rettendon murders were discovered. The first thing O'Mahony did when the police walked up to him was to offer them the sports bag. Why? We can only speculate because the police chose not to investigate, but we know O'Mahony was asked by Tucker and Tate to act as a backup driver in a big drug deal / robbery. We only have O'Mahony's word that he turned their offer down. We know from his track record that it was an unusual decision for O'Mahony to take, particularly as he was floundering financially at the time. We know from O'Mahony their robbery was both successful and lucrative. This was obviously not the alleged deal Nichols talks of in his dud cannabis evidence. We know the Rettendon trio were threatening to shoot O'Mahony. We know in turn he was neither concerned or the type of man one should threaten. We know he was in Rettendon within 30 minutes of the murders being committed. We know none of these men, who were deeply paranoid, kept anything involving drugs in their homes. He, O'Mahony, replied to the police 6 times, "You lot have searched my house, there's nothing there." Could Tate's loyal and trusted friend John Marshall have held part, or all of the heist from the drug robbery, to prevent the police, who were crawling all over the trio and O'Mahony following Lear's death, from finding it? Part all or none of the heist may have been recovered by the killers at Rettendon from the bag found in the Range Rover. We only know it was empty. Fearing for his own safety, Marshall may have called a meeting to return the trio's ill-gotten gains, but Marshall would have known too much, and he was silenced when he arrived with the sports bag containing the goods. 25th of April 97, page 20. Drugs author living in fear. O'Mahony confesses he is living in fear and states, "I couldn't stay in Basildon or anywhere else in Essex for that matter." He goes on to say there are people who would like to see the back of him because of what he had said and done. He also lies about his whereabouts, saying he is living near Portsmouth. Why? 1.5 years after the deaths of the Rettendon trio, does O'Mahony clearly believe that there are people who want to see him dead? We know he is not concerned about Tucker's friends. He went to see them after the murders at the Southend nightclub. We know nobody but the Rettendon trio had a problem with O'Mahony, unless there was something he hadn't disclosed in his book. Is it possible O'Mahony did take up Tucker and Tate's offer to take part in the robbery? Is that why he is in fear? Is that why he was given armed police protection? The defence at Sid and Womes' trial claimed Tate had upset a syndicate for not handing over their full share from a cocaine deal worth thousands of pounds. We have learned O'Mahony, a man without any visible income at the time, paid £15,000 to £20,000 off of his mortgage in cash in April 96. There were other links with the Kent and South East London. Kenneth Noy, Tate's friend, is reported to have lost several £1,000s because of a deal that went wrong involving the Rettendon trio. Noy lived in Kent. Marshall knew him. O'Mahony had met Noy through his Cray associates at a charity function in Woodham, Essex. Mickey Bowman lived in Bromley, Kent, 2 or 3 miles from O'Mahony's Cowden Street flat. Why was he at Raquel's 3 weeks before the murders, apparently backing Tucker and Tate against O'Mahony? Bowman, we know, was arrested at his home in Bromley, yet he was charged by Essex police and appeared before Basildon magistrates for possessing a machine gun. Surely if there is no link, this was a matter for Kent Police? Is this why Basildon police also investigated Marshall's murder, which took place in Kent? The defence also claimed Nichols had something to do with these killings. What it was, we will probably never know. And what his involvement was with the syndicate, we shall never know. We do know, weeks after the murders, someone from O'Mahony's native Birmingham contacted the police and named Nichols as the killer. We also know O'Mahony was named as the killer in anonymous messages and at least one letter to the police. Both men had met at least once, at Tate's bedside following the shooting by Ellis. It was there Nichols was ridiculed by Tate, the man who we know O'Mahony was growing to hate. We know from Ellis a plot was being hatched to lure him to the hospital so Tate could shoot him. Nichols must have listened to these people conspiring to lure a man to his death. We know from Tate's mother, Marie Tate, that Tate was discussing the murder of Whitaker. O'Mahony claims, in his book, Tucker told him, "We won't be getting any more trouble from Mr. Whitaker." Did Nichols hear this being repeated at the hospital? Because some may say, ironically, he testified in court. Steele's first words to him after the murders were, "We won't be getting any more trouble from these three." In The Guardian, March the 7th, 1996, John Mullins wrote, "Some detectives believe the gunman was in the Range Rover with his victims. Others think he stepped out of the shadows after the Range Rover's occupants were lured to Workhouse Lane. Others still favour a hybrid. The gunman was indeed waiting, but the man who ordered the murders had hired a professional hitman and arrived with the others in the back seat, a trusted colleague or friend." Again, this mirrors the evidence Nichols gave. It is possible he too reads the papers, or the same detectives who spoke to John Mullins aired their views to Nichols. The most worrying factors about all this evidence is the fact neither the defendants or the jury were allowed to consider it. The police not only withheld oral and written evidence, they failed to mention the fact a live shotgun cartridge with the fingerprints of a suspect other than the accused was at the murder scene, and they hadn't bothered to look for it. Given the evidence we know, and we are sure there is more, the jury should have been told about the cartridge and the man whose prints were on it. The missing or lost cartridge is a relevant material piece of evidence for the reasons we have outlined, but also because missing or mislaid cartridges were an issue the jury were asked to consider, and had all the evidence been made available to them, they may have reached a different verdict. Scenes of Crimes Officers Detective Inspector Hughes and Detective Constable Peter Bettis combed the area and made a note of all the evidence they collected. However, the officers disagreed on where one particular shotgun cartridge was found, and despite hundreds of photographs being taken, there is not one of a cartridge Detective Constable Bettis claims he recovered from the Range Rover's footwell. He admitted it may have accidentally been kicked into the position we found it. With police officers playing football amongst the carnage with shotgun cartridges in the vehicle, is it beyond doubt a live shotgun cartridge was dropped or mislaid by the killers? Or this was overlooked by the police and was ignored when it came to light, as the fingerprints it bore would have destroyed the case against Williams and Steele and destroyed the possibility of the police's star witness appearing at the Betts trial? Michael Steele and Jack Williams were convicted of murder on far less evidence. O'Mahony was not even formally questioned. Instead, Essex Police, and in particular Detective Inspector Brian Story, embraced him as their star witness in the Leah Betts trial, gave him armed police protection, and ensured any embarrassing links between him, Betts and Rettendon were severed forever. So guys, thanks a lot for listening. One little thing I will pick up out of this is about the craze. Now, on Bernard O'Mahony's website, he has basically dedicated the site around the Essex boys' murders, but there is a section, I mean, the site itself has photographs, has articles, information about the case, etc. But it also has audio recordings, including the voicemail of Tony Tucker and Pat Tate. But for some reason, Bernard O'Mahony has gone out of his way to put these recordings of him talking to, I think it's Ronnie Cray, Ronnie or Reds, I can't remember which one, but every time he's like, "Oh, hello, God bless you," like Bernard is just licking his arsehole, and it's very, very cringeworthy. Because I thought I'd put that out there because I didn't want it to come across like he was best mates with the Craze, because I really doubt that was the case. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for listening. Let us know any feedback from the mic. Not that sort of feedback if you get the joke, but let us know if it sounds any better, sounds any worse. And like I said, I will be aiming to deliver a lot more content in the future, so stay tuned. Take care.